please join me in welcoming Fuesanta.
Thank you very much.
Excited.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I don't know what to say. I don't know if I'm going to be able to be up to the expectations. So if I'm not, please forgive me. Thank you very much for inviting me. I mean, it's the second time that I've been in Austin, and really, thank you also for the morning you have given me. It has been great, and I think I know much more of the place where I'm now, and I'm ready to come back. And I've not even left it. I'm ready to come back already.
Let's get that in writing.
So the name of Art City Landscape relates to really to the work that we are doing, because for us art means we do. We have worked in a lot of buildings about art, but I don't mean that we have worked in a lot of museums, but also that we work in relation to art. It's not only when we work also looking many times to old buildings, old existing buildings, old structures, and that is a big part of our projects. And also we like to bring in artists to work with us, and not simply to put a sculpture or something there, but to bring them also to the project. City and landscape, I think that Kevin really spoke of it very well, because for us it's important to relate to the context in which we are building. And relating to the context in which we are building is, for us, is understanding it. It's getting into the history of it, and it's trying to establish a dialogue between the new building, the old existing structures, if there is, and if not, relating to the city or to the landscape in which we are working. I've put together 12 different buildings. They are of different uses, all of them, and I want to talk about them, really explaining them through the idea, the concept that generated them. When we are working in a building, and I have said before in a project, what we normally do is we try to understand context. In that way we first study the history, how was the place before, how is the place now, and during that process, of course, suddenly, and we get we think, well, this is the idea, the concept that will drive through the building. So I'm going to speak of an archaeological land that inspired a museum for archaeology, or maybe a landscape that is the place that also inspired the facade, or even pieces of art directly for the building that we are working on, or maybe even the art that is exhibited in the building. So I'm going to speak about an archaeological museum in Cordoba, about a museum of the city in San Sebastian, about an expressionist art museum in Halle, about a commercial area in Madrid, about an artist residence and museum in Cordoba, about a hospital in Bristol, a hotel in Munich, an archive in Dresden, an exhibition area in Hamburg, the city of the theater in Paris, an office building in Guangzhou in China, and a very special place in Estonia for a foundation for a musician. Let me start with this project, Medinat Al-Zahara Museum. It's an old project for us, but it's very, this was really our first important project, and for me, it's very difficult to explain our work without talking about this project, because a lot of the ideas that we get through all our life of work have really started, and we have really started here in this project of Cordoba. Medinat Al-Zahara is a beautiful place, an archaeological site, a city that was built by the first caliph of the Caliphate of Cordoba in the year 940. And it was built to demonstrate his power. The city was very soon destroyed 70 years later in 1040. And of course, it gave the archaeologists a very important archaeological site, because as you see it here now, you see the excavation is only the white area. The rest of the walls that you can see, trace them in the photograph, are still for excavating. The city was completely, when it was destroyed, it disappeared completely. It became a legendary city. And even in the year 1910, when these people discovered it again, they believed that it was not Medinat Al-Zahara, but someplace else. Anyway, the city was discovered. And the city is built in a mountain, in the side of the mountain, under strong geometrical conditions. It's a perfect double square, except in the upper part where it touches the mountain. And the Andalusian government, recognizing its importance, launched a competition for the museum, a museum inside, an archaeological museum. When we were starting, I mean, this is the city in 1010, as you see, the beautiful carved stones and also the red color. The color of the city was basically stone and red, nearly white and red. This was the discovery of the city in this very bad situation, and this was when the museum was built in order to get there also all the pieces that were found in the archaeological site. When we started thinking of this museum, we started thinking also of another archaeological excavation. A place, this is Ebla, a place in which the archaeologists had made an excavation by boxes, in which they had referred their discoveries to a grid that they had traced. So what we decided to do is to work as archaeologists instead of architects. So what we really proposed was a varied museum. A museum that through its structure was going to relate to a grid that is coming out also and organizes the landscape around it. But the most important thing is that it also organizes the roof. A roof in a building like this is the most very important place because it's the only facade. And with this only facade, for us it was important to relate both to the landscape in which it was, and also to start establishing this series of relationships that we want to establish with the archaeological site. And that was a bit the choice of the coloring. First of all, the Corten steel that matches with the landscape around, and at the same time, red and white, which were also the colors of Madinat al-Zahra. A buried building, of course, receives the light through different patios. In our case, 6 different patios. The central one, which is, it gives light to the vestibule and to the more public areas. An orange one, because it gives light to the cafeteria with orange trees. A golden one for the museum. A green one for the areas that are, with the archaeologists are working. The entrance ramp, and also the back part of another patio to access with the pieces that we find in Madinat al-Zahra. And now here, the geometry that we used is also a double square in relation to the same geometry that the city had. And the line that divides the 2 squares is also the line that divides the building in the more public area and the more private area in which the archaeologists are working. Going to the excavation place, when we see this, the city of Madinat, what we see here, it's one building that comes out of the sand. When the archaeologist takes away all the sand that has been buried in the building comes out as a finished structure, in the same way that we expected that our building to come out as a finished structure after the structure was built because of the choice of materials. So for us, working with an existing structure is establishing this kind of relations between the new and the old. Relations that sometimes are personal, other relates to scale or to the way that we view things, like these 2 spaces, open courtyards that are going to give light to the spaces behind, or these walls that through its through its doors, they have these long views, these diagonal views that produce very strong lights in both places. I mean, the shared rhythm of walls and of beams and columns. These freestanding walls that speak about the spaces that are not existing, or yes they are, that we are going to see behind. The proportion and the scale, long and thin, in order to give shadow and protect the building from the very strong sun of Cordoba. The way that we enter in through these long spaces, that at the end they get to the entrances of the building and of the city. And of course, the relation between the roofs, getting away, skipping the scale because in the roofs of Medinat Alzara, here we see the different patios, the different courtyards of the houses. In the roofs of the new building, what we see is the courtyards of the building and also the lines of light that introduce the light into the building. Always establishing this relation that for us is important. Also the view from the mountain, because remember that I said in the beginning, the city is on the top of a mountain. So when you sit down, what you're going to see is the trace of the building, a building that we hope that belongs to the landscape and that really disappears and seems like a piece of land art and relating to the landscape and to the city of Medinat Alzara. So for us, this series of relationships is something that we take every time that we work with an existing building. As I said before, we like to understand and then to establish this dialogue, a dialogue that relates the one piece to the other, and that I understand that sometimes is personal, but it relates many times to scale, to proportion, other times some things that are less, more objective, like color, like material, the unity of material, and that if we really understand well the structure in which we are starting to work, we can take through the whole of the building. And from Cordoba, we are going to go to the north of Spain, to the city of San Sebastian. In San Sebastian, we entered the competition for the restoration and extension of Museum San Telmo. This is the city of San Sebastian, a beautiful city in the coast, and that has this special place which is there that has this mountain, and is this mountain that is kept green through all the centuries that the city has been living, and is precisely there between the natural landscape and the landscape of the city, where is the convent of San Telmo. Looking backwards, we see the city, the old city, and you see also that the mountain is already there and is not built, and it's something that has been kept like that for long years, something exceptional, because normally the growth of the city really takes away all the landscape. So for us to understand this mountain there was quite important. It is here, precisely here, where we decided to put the extension of the building. We decided to separate and to work in the building by restoration and put the extension in that interstitial space between the mountain and the existing building. A new building that was going to organize the relation between the existing building, between the mountain, and again between the city. The urban space and the natural space were going to be connected through this new wall. Geometrically, we worked, I don't have the pointer, but geometrically we worked with the same geometry in order to create patios where we have patios, long lines, long open patios where we had it on the other side, and we were using the same proportion, the same scale to work on one building and on the other one. But what was really important was this wall, the facade of this new building, a facade through which maybe mostly an opaque facade that was going to establish those two relations. For that, here we worked with some sculptures of the Basque Country, Ferran and Otero. With them, we went to walk around the mountain, and we saw this situation in which the greenery was coming out of some of the holes of the stone. And we decided to translate this, if we could, to our facade. We used recycled aluminum panels that were going to be perforated, and through those perforations, the greenery is going to come out. If we see it in the distance, the facade really seems like to be a single drawing, like, I mean, the same drawing. But if we go near, we understand that the facade is organized by the variation and repetition of 5 different panels. 5 panels that go from a blank panel to a panel that has 260 perforations, and that they are mounted 3 by 3 in a way that they can be continued, extended through the doors. The facade goes inside the building, creates these new patios in relation to the other ones, and organizes not only that the green is coming out, here is not yet there because the photographs were taken before, but also that during the night, the light is also going to come out, and it's going to be, the facade is going to be used also for the lighting of the patios and of the open spaces of the building. We built in these very difficult conditions, this very long and thin situation that of course is transmitted to the inside of the building, creating the new exhibitions area in this long and tall proportion. And it's the same proportion in the same similar scale to the cloisters of the existing building, and also establishes the same relation with the nave of the central church. For us, we need to build new stairs that took us to the roof in order to get to the exhibition, to the new exhibition spaces, and we simply put them in continuing the already existing stair. Always contemporary architecture and existing architecture in direct contact, but in direct contact with a distance of respect, a distance that allows us simply to turn it away and return the space to the same way as it was originally created. The same happens with the two walls. The two walls in dialogue one and the other, but also with this distance of respect in order to be able, both of them, to return to their original state. When the wall and the facade comes out to the new plaza, it conforms during the night like an light installation for the city of San Sebastian. It's a light installation that gives light to the plaza and allows in the stair that it's in the back part to go and visit the Mount Turgul. A facade that changes in the different times of the year. So here, I don't know, I guess that we are, I don't know, this photo was taken from internet. It's not a photo of us, but I loved it because I could understand that maybe we were seeing the summer in the museum. And from San Sebastian, let's go to the city of Halle, where we entered a competition for an expressionist art museum. The city of Halle is situated in East Germany, and it is there where there is this very beautiful structure, the castle, the Morisburg Castle. This is the city of Halle, and the castle is in a place which is this place here. It's a wonderful structure, which is that one that was built in the 15th century, and that, the same as Medina Zara, had a short story because it was very shortly destroyed in the War of the 30 Years, and it was never rebuilt. So it was in this state for a very long time, to the point that the people that lived in the city of Halle called it the ruin. So we understood through it that that image of the ruin was very linked to the city of Halle. The first restoration was of two wings of the castle in order to create the first part of this Expressionist museum. And the second one is the competition that was launched and that we participated for the other two wings. So when we went to see the place, we found the situation like that. The two wings that were in a complete ruin, but the walls were still standing there, and it was for us very powerful to view the ruin and the stone, how it was. The other wings that were already built with the big, tall roofs, but that in another way had been also these very tall roofs that belonged also to the rest of the city. The city that had been painted by Feininger, painter of the collection that had lived in Halle and that had painted the whole city with this very, at least for us, very beautiful geometry. So we decided that we already knew what we had to do, a new roof landscape. A new roof landscape that, through the skylights and its geometry, was going to relate at the same time to the roofs of the city and also to the painting and the exhibition that was going to be inside the museum. It was also a structural roof. In a way, you only position it on top of the stone walls and it could hold itself, and also in this way, we could hang from it the new extension of the exhibitions area. In that way, we avoided to create any columns, and we left that wing that we have seen in the photograph exactly as we had seen it. So for us, it was important that in the inside, we could keep it in this way, and to keep the stone restored, of course, but in the way that we had looked to it, because we thought it was important because it was already linked to the mind of the city. Again, contemporary architecture and existing architecture linked together and creating and getting together in those interstitial spaces. The new space and the two new exhibitions area that are lit by the skylights, and outside the new roof, a roof that is built in aluminum panels, and because of that also, and because of the very white skies that we have in the ceiling in the sky of Halle, sometimes the roof even seems to disappear in the sky. So for us, it was very important to choose the material here, not only because of what I said, that it was important that the material had the correct relation to the already existing materials, but at the same time, we had chosen a difficult construction. We had to build very steep roofs with very difficult angles. So for us, the correct decision was to build in aluminum panels. And with aluminum panels and the very perfect and excellent German construction, we managed to get these very beautiful angles. Here is our team inspecting the roof. And really this roof that relates both to the roofs of the city and to this geometry, and this within this material and this geometry that we are going to build all the other elements that are non-existent because they were completely destroyed, and that we have to reconstruct, to rebuild in order to make the museum work well. Like, for example, this tower through which we are going to introduce the works of art. The roof standing on top of the existing walls. As you see, the walls, we did restore them, but we did not touch them. So in order for them to be also a reference to the city in which they were created. So from this roof of the city of Halle, we are going to come back to Madrid, in which we built a temporary market. This market is within a much bigger project that I'm not going to speak about today in the center of Madrid, which is about the restructuring an area in the central part of Madrid, and also rebuilding an existing market and introducing in the market a lot of different uses, like we have to redo a new market, and sports hall, and a library. So during the time that we were going to demolish the market and build it again, we need the people that were working in the market to go to some place. So we, the government of Madrid, the City Hall of Madrid, asked us to build a temporary market in that plaza that it's in the back part, very near where the original market was. For us, it was a problem also of scale. If we had used all the space with one single roof, it would have destroyed, as you see, the little scale that was around it in all the other houses that existing in that area of Madrid. So, because temporary things tend to last more than when they are thought of, we decided even then to simply make a change of scale and to divide the volume of the market. So we are going to do a market with the repetition and variation of the same element, an hexagon. With this floor plan, we repeated this pentagon, 3 times, and another 3 times here in order to create the different spaces for the people to sell their products. When we go to the outside, you see that all of them are the same, but at the same time, all of them are different because of the section, different inclinations that allow us to move the scale and to relate better to the smaller scale. The entrance is done in the interstitial space between the pentagons. The materials that we are using here, of course, are temporary materials. This steel structure that was to be reused in someplace else, and a polycarbonate that during the day allowed us to introduce the light through the upper part of the pentagons in order to light the interior spaces that were built in white, and it was the color of the food that was going to give the color to the elements. When we go outside during the day, you see the pentagons that give the light to the interior, and during the night, it's the opposite situation, and simply the light is coming out from the inside to the outside. And again, as in the case of San Sebastian, these elements are the ones that are going to light the plaza and to give the plaza the light that it needs during the night. So in this image, a market that is done by the repetition and variation of the same element, and that is as temporary as the image of the man above playing chess with himself. Let's go now to the contemporary center of Cordoba, because here we worked with a similar geometry, but beginning from a much different concept. So here we are working in the city of Cordoba, in this area that we see more in white in the photograph, and in front of a building that for me is one of the most impressive buildings of the world, which is the Mosque of Cordoba. So working here, we really wanted to look to the mosque and to understand the magnificence of that space. An amazing space that is built by the repetition of the same element, the double arch. For us, it was also important to see this geometry that we saw in those beautiful trellises of the Arab and Islamic architecture, something that was repeated also in the roofs at a different scale. Geometry that seemed very complicated, but at the end it's an easier geometry because it's easier geometries that are overlapped one on top of each other. So we asked ourselves if we would be able, with these concepts, to organize the new building that we were looking for, the Contemporary Art Center of Cordoba. So we started working with hexagons, an hexagon that we divided in 3 different exhibition areas, because it was what we were asked for in the brief, an exhibition of 90 meters, 30 and 60 meters. With that, we produced rotations, symmetries and variations of the same element that we joined together in a fluid space that was continuous and that could be used in many different ways. Either one single space for an exhibition area with 2 big scaled hexagons at the end that were for the auditorium, or 9 different spaces used individually and independently in the way we liked. That was the center of the exhibition space, the center of the building, that divided the building in 2 areas. One, a vestibule, a long vestibule that had 2 entrances on both of the sides and that could communicate with any one of the hexagons in the center. On the other side, a place for the artist to produce their art in direct contact with the exhibition area in which it was going to be exhibited. The geometry was not 2-dimensional geometry because we are working also in the volume. So all these spaces also had these hexagons that introduced the light inside. These hexagons were organized around these 3 double bearing walls. In between them, we had all the installations and elements that we needed to make them work. When we look at the hexagons from behind, we understand that we have, in some places, we have these skylights. In other ones, we have open spaces that allow the visitor to simply have a time to relax and to look to the sea. Ah, there's something wrong here. Sorry for that. Can you help me? What do I do here? Do I connect my computer or? Let me try again. Okay. Maybe it's coming out, I don't know. I'm skipping part of it, and this is the interior of the space. What the images that you have not seen before are showing the facade in the outside. And the facade in the outside is really white and is solved also in the same way as the rest of the geometry. It's a facade that is white and solved in that same geometry that in the inside we made of bus concrete, because what we are trying to do here is that the artist reacts, because it's not a standard museum. It's a place that's going to receive the art from the creators that are living there. In between the 2 big walls, you have these elements, the doors, that when they come down, they divide the space into those different exhibition areas. So we had more compressed areas through the skylights and other more big expanded areas. And it is in these expanded areas that we organize the transition of spaces. Here, for example, we enter the auditorium, and also we access the upper part of the building in which there exists another kind of places for the artists to work, and also the offices of the place, that we give light through these glass elements that in some moments during the day, they also receive light from the facade that you have not seen, but that now you can imagine that is also resolved in the same geometry, an hexagonal facade. It is the same thing that we did in the opaque facade that is looking to the river, which I hope it comes out now, that I'm going to show out now. Simply we perforated in some specific spaces, and when the sun is shining and bright outside, simply we receive this like very beautiful rain of light in the inside of the building. Of course, the building is for experimenting art, and here is the building functioning with the different arts working here, with an experimental dancing, and one of the last exhibitions with this blue stair that is an exhibition from Yoko Ono. The building outside in the roof is solved with the same geometry, and as I said before, this is also our team in the roof inspecting it, I hope. And these elements that are the elements that are patios that when you are leaving the inside of the building, you can simply go there to rest and simply look at the sky. The facade that you had not seen before, this facade is given to a river. It's looking to a river. It's a facade that is built of concrete, of white prefabricated concrete, but it's also a media facade by the introduction of certain lamps, LED lamps, in between the hexagons that give light and reflect into the different faces of the hexagon. We create a media facade with also playing with the different scales of the geometry, and we create this media facade that shows to the outside what the artists are doing in the inside. This is a video. It's an old video because I have not been able to get videos of the artists working with the facade, but this is a video that was done for the test of the facade when it was created. Better? Okay. That was what I was talking before. This is prefabricated concrete panel, and in these panels we insert a series of lights that are controlled through a computer, and with the computer they give, and it's all in black and white. So when you are near the facade, you only see the shadows, but when you get away from the facade on the other side of the river, you can start getting the different images that you can produce simply by working from the inside. Here, for us, it was also important to work with the reflection of the river. As you see, the facade is reflecting on the river. It comes out to be a media facade of 1,500 pixels. So you only see it from the back part. When you get near, you start again perceiving part of the facade and part of the concrete panels. So this is the building in Cordoba, in which many times we have been asked if we have used a special kind of geometry, and I have to say that we always, or many times, we start working with models. And in this case, it was that way. We started working with a model. The same as in this other hospital, in this other competition, for a facade for the Hospital of Bristol. So now here we are in the city of Bristol in a competition that was very special, because it was a competition that we were invited with another, I think it was 8 teams, of which we were 4 architects and 4 artists, because what they really wanted was to change the facade of the building. A facade that, as you see, it says it's an ugly hospital. It was even written that it was the ugliest hospital of England. Something that we did not believe at all, because at the same time, we also did the research of how was the building initially. And initially, that was the building that was built in the 60s, which for us is quite a strong building, and it was a correct, more than a correct building. I would say even it's a good building there. What was the problem of this building? The problem of this building was that the maintenance was horrible. It had absolutely no maintenance, and not only that, it had all sorts of terrible additions that were really destroying the facade and the look of the building from the outside. So in the beginning, we did not want to do this competition because for us it was strange to work in a competition that it was only 2-dimensional. So what we thought is, okay, let's make it 3-dimensional. So what we did was simply create a screen, and by cutting that screen and folding it, we organized a new element that not only did a new facade on the upper side, but at the same time created, introduced within the building the elements that were sticking out, and also organized a new access, a new green courtyard that access better to the building. The upper part, we organized a grid that relates to the original building, and in the lower part, the grid relates to the existing ones. Here we see how the facade is working, how it integrates the volume that was added, and how also creates a new small garden, but that separates the entrance of the hospital to the very busy street in front. So this is the model that we presented, and you see here the building, the upper part, really the grid of the facade really is the same as the one in the old building. And that really did help a lot for the construction, because one of the very important things here is that the facade had asbestos, so it had to be taken away. But instead of taking it away, what we did is, by using the same grid, simply encapsulate it, so it could be kept there, and we could work with the hospital still on working. In the lower part of the building, the grid changes, and it changes to adapt to the different conditions that we have there, especially sometimes near the street when we have to get it thicker in separation to the cars, or to create a new entrance for the ambulances, or even it gets more open when we have to cover the existing building in which there is a new cafeteria. And especially to separate the street and to create this small place, but a small place where you can sit down, relax, and have simply a relaxing time before entering or after going out of the hospital. Facade that really creates a new frontier, a new barrier between a very busy street, so you don't see it now, but it's full of cars, full of noise, and that we simply wanted to separate it a bit from the hospital, which is a hospital for children. And from Bristol, we are going to go to Munich, in which we work we work through the thinking of a void space in the center of the building. Here is the city of Munich, and in that place that you see there is one of the still existing doors of the city of Munich, and you see here, maybe you can trace a little bit what were this circle, what were the walls of the city of Munich. Right there in the middle of that circle, we have a walking street, a pedestrian street, that goes directly to this building. And in this case, for example, nobody says that this is an ugly building, but for us, really, this was an ugly building with no architectural value. And this was a competition which was very interestingly organized, because the owners of this building, they wanted to make a building of 9 stories high. Here we only have 5.5. So the City Hall said, okay, fine, if you want to do that, we understand that we can give you the permission to do it, but you have to organize an international competition. And the international competition was organized with the City Hall inviting 5 architects and the owners of the building invited other 5 architects. And the jury was organized in the same way. They were half people of the city hall, half people belonging to the owners, I mean of the owners team. So that was the building that we had to demolish and to build a new building, which is not this one. This is the building that was there before, because this was this building that we had to demolish was built on the rest of that other building. And maybe these photographs, I think that they are especially impressive now with this thing that we are having in Europe, this war that we are having in Europe. But here you see in between the doors, you see the doors of the city and the beautiful building that we have in the backside. And here you have the same image after the war, with the building completely destroyed and the other one, the ugly one, that was built on top of the rest of this older building. For us, again, we tried to understand what was happening in that area, and we discovered that from the very beginning there was a volume situated there in front of the door of the city. So when you go back, this is the image before the war, but it's the same image now. When you are walking through that pedestrian street, you really have this door that centers your view to the building of the hotel, that when you get out to the plaza is the one that is in the center of the plaza and really organizes the circulation around. So for us, this competition and this new building was a work about frontality, about the relation of the new element and the existing wall of the city. What we did was we organized that we prolonged the public space, and we introduced the public space in the building, even getting it to the rooftop. And we did that by working with a void. So all of our project was centered in this center of the building, in which we created a void around which, in section you see it better, all the rest of the building, which is a hotel of 100 rooms, was organized. Here you have the model that we presented to the competition only of the void area, in which you see that the void runs around the building, and especially, maybe we see it better in the render, the terraces really go out towards the city, towards the door, and seeing the old part of the city of Munich. Here the relation to the void space and all around it really for us is less important, because it is also here that the void is centering our attention. And again, when we are walking through the pedestrian street, we get to this element that really seems to divide the building in two. For us, this element, this void, which we try to give more expression by taking importance away of the facade, making the plain facade, bringing the windows up to the front, and so that we can also see this big void during the night. This is the image of the building, the first image that I showed you, 1 century, in the 19th century, in the 20th century, and here is the building that now is under construction, and that we hope that you can soon see the image of the 21st century. What we see here is also already the volume built. The facade is beneath all those, I don't know how you say the word, but it's exactly. And this is the interior of the building, in which at least the structure is completely finished. And from this void, we are going to go to another building in which we're also playing with the void, an archive in the city of Dresden. And this is a visitable archive that the city of Dresden is organizing with a collection of the avant-garde collector. And I want to start, this is the area in which the building is on the other side of the river. And I want to start here showing an image that was drawn by Canaletto. Canaletto is the painter that painted Venezia. In this case, he is not this one, is his nephew, that painted beautiful views of different cities of Europe. In this case, it's the city of Dresden in 1747. And we tried to get the same photograph, a photograph with the same perspective as the one in this painting. Of course, you see a very different situation and a very different city, but if we look closer and you see those two elements there, and we get nearer, you see that element, that building that is there under construction is the same building that we have here under construction, in which we are going to build the archive, the new archive for Dresden. And for me, this situation and these images are very important because it's explaining this process of construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. It's like this life that the buildings have, and that it can continue on, and it relates very well, and it's of course a coincidence that we have seen the two buildings together. So it is here that the city of Dresden offered this man, Elpidio Marzona, which is an Italian-German collector, the possibility of exhibiting his archive, a visitable archive. And this archive is an amazing collection, more than 1 million elements, and that it has all sorts of things, drawings, books, objects, furniture, and they are spread all over the city of Berlin. So there was a competition to organize the archive in this building. The building is on the other side of the river, and originally it was 2 buildings, really. It was the doors of the city, in which the guards were guarding the city. The 2 of them were never built. Only one of them was built in a different proportion, bigger. This is an image, a drawing, a painting of it, and this is the building really built. And again, I'm going to put this image because for me, it really hurts my heart when I see the image of the building built and that image that was destroyed after the war. Something that happened in the city of Dresden completely, because the city of Dresden was completely destroyed. Anyway, it was rebuilt, and it was rebuilt in a very good way, because they were very conscious to build it very well in the outside. It was not rebuilt exactly in the inside, because it was for office buildings, and so the outside was rebuilt as it was before, not in the inside. So when we found the building, of course we kept the facade, but in the inside it was a blank space. So in that blank space that was nearly a cube, what we proposed was to create a new slab that was going to be, the structure of this new slab was going to be the vertical communications, elevator and 2 stairs that allowed us to go to visit that slab. In the center, a void in which it is hanging a concrete box that comes hanging from the roof, and that will contain the new archive. In that way, what we organized was also that the lower part, the ground area, was an area in which we could do a multi-purpose area in which could do different exhibitions, and also a public space that belonged to the city. So this is the ground area in which you can enter. We can have from a lecture or from different exhibitions, like for example this one that is already organized for when the building is finished. It's an exhibition of the jet set, or this other one, an exhibition of burle marks, or this other one that for us was very interesting because we already drew it, of a dancing exhibition, and in which the way of exhibiting it was following the way that the dancers were moving. What is important for us is that then we had the hanging archive, a visitable archive that can be accessed through the new slab, and that the people could simply take the elements and study them in that place. And also, it's important to have it up there because you have to think that we are building right beside the river, a river that floods sometimes, and it is important to keep the archive above from the water. This is the image that we presented to the competition, in which we saw one of the vertical elements, the stair, that it's also a structural stair. And this is a visit on site that we did 2 months ago. The building is really growing. And here you have the hanging cube, the vertical elements built in concrete, like you see there, the door that is going to be the door of the stairs, and you see, maybe you can start seeing the space underneath, the space under the cube, the free space that we are going to keep open to the city, and the stair, the structural stair, which was very difficult to build, and I'm really proud of having been able to build it. Of course, starting with this stair, I want to finish with this series of relations that we, as I said before, is something that we always try to do with the buildings in which we are working. And I don't want to finish with, without these two images, because for me also they represent what I was talking in the first place, about this series of construction, deconstruction, reconstruction, about the lives of the building and how a building can continue its life with simply another use. From Dresden, we are going to go to the city of Hamburg, in which we participated in a competition to create the Mont Blanc house. The Mont Blanc house, which is in Germany, and this company that produced these beautiful pens, that they are beautiful and also produce this very, very beautiful writing. And it was a competition in which they wanted to build their new house to exhibit their artwork, the art collection, and also a very impressive collection of pens. So in the brief, it was said also that we had to take into consideration their logo, the Mount Mont Blanc. And in that sense, what they wanted to say with that is that the Mont Blanc means that they wanted to go as high as they could, always higher, always being better. The place in which we had to build is this industrial area, Altona, in the outskirts of the city of Hamburg, in which they produce their pens. This is the area, and the building was supposed to be there in that parking space in front of the industrial building. So what we proposed and what we suggested was to build a new long building that occupied all the space, with a garden in front to separate it from the rest of the parking area, and in order to create a new entrance, a new facade for the industrial building. So what we did was build a building with the same proportion as one of the boxes to hold the pens of the Mont Blanc. This is one of the beautiful boxes that they hold the pens, the Mont Blanc pens inside. A very straightforward element that has in its inside the complexity needed to produce this very beautiful writing, something that we wanted to do also with our building. A straightforward facade that in the inside had the necessary complexity to solve the building that we were asking for. A three-story building with a very public area in the ground floor, selling, cafeteria, etc. In the middle, art exhibition, pens and art, and in the upper floor is an area to give seminarios in order to show the way that the pens worked. The section was organized around the central space, the central communication space, that could also have the opportunity to communicate directly to the existing building. Right in the entrance, when you enter, we already have the first exhibition space, and very important for us, the outside, the facade. A facade that was proposed in a way that the way that the hand follows the writing of a pen. A facade of black concrete with different layers and with different foldings in each one of the layers. Also, a facade that could have that could receive projections from the outside during the night, and in the same way of thinking as Cordoba, so that we could see from the outside what was happening in the exhibitions in the inside. This is one of the great number of drawings that we produced for the facade, and also we had a mock-up one-to-one from the very beginning on site. And it taught us a lot of things about how the light was going to work, about how the different foldings should be, and especially that it's very difficult to produce black concrete, nearly impossible. The building is nearly finished. This is part of the treatment of the facade. It's going to be opened the 13th of May. The facade here, it's about 1 month ago, so it's still is not completed, especially in the ground area, and especially, which is also important for us, the garden in front. This is the inside space, which is also in the process to finish. This is a photo of the summer, and also the interior exhibitions that are really very advanced and in really the process of nearly finishing. Again, the facade with the different layers and with the different foldings, as you see it here, and the test of the light during the night. I put this image. It's not really finished yet, but I thought it was simply nice to bring it. But if we won this competition, I think it was for in the way that we presented it, because we worked with this model that is really a box for the pens that the Montblanc company is selling, that if you open it inside, it has the complexity that you need to produce the building that we were asked for. And from this building, we are going to go to a special place, the city of Guangzhou in China, which I haven't been since before the pandemic. So I don't feel very sure when I present this project. It's only the second time that I speak about this project, because you are going to see the project, or I'm going to see the project really at the same time as you, because I haven't seen it directly. It's the only one of our buildings that is built without us seeing it. This is the city of Guangzhou, a huge city in the border of the Pearl River that with Hong Kong and Shenzhen, the three cities together, they conform a place of 45 million people. We are not in the center of the city. We are in this area, in the border of a mountain, in which we were invited, after winning one competition in Guangzhou, we were invited to do this other competition for the offices, for the railway railway offices. So again, we looked back to the beautiful architecture that was the traditional architecture of the city of Guangzhou. And we found this very beautiful architecture made by addition of these small elements one by one, but that especially had these very beautiful roofs that were finished in this very special way, and this thing was made of ceramics. So for us, it was important. Now we went to the brief of the competition, in which we were asked to produce a building, an office building, but at the same time they wanted also a public space. So they wanted an office building with a public space below that was open to the city. So we created two systems. One linear system that was perfect for the design of offices, and another system that crossed it with this geometry again of pentagons, that when they hit with the more linear elements, they created these special elements in which they were going to be the public areas of the building, but at the same time they produced these patios, these courtyards that were open to the city and created a more public space in the lower parts of the building. So you see, is this public space that crosses the building, that in the lower area divides it in two, and maybe someday it will get to that back part in which we thought that it could be an open space, an open garden. This is the structure, and it's important because the structure, by the way that we do it, it liberates the facade in order to be able to be free in the facade, designing it in a way, in any way that did not condition the structure of the building. Because building in China, it was the first time that we had built in China. We were not sure of what was going to happen, and we wanted to make it in a way that the mistakes were possible to correct. So what we decided to do is to do a facade that was about the repetition of the same element. We designed a ceramical piece of different colors that was going to solve in different heights and with different agrupations the whole of the facade. This is already the built facade, which is the one I haven't seen, in which you see that the proportion, the element is the same, but if we want to have more height or less height, we simply added less or more elements. So what we did, this element was produced following the traditional, this form, this shape that we thought it was so interesting. We produced an element that was with this shape, and this is the, how do you say, yes, thank you. And this is already the ceramic piece, And this is the last time I went to China, which I went to inspect all the ceramic pieces that were, it was impressive because it was a whole space full of these ceramic pieces. That also made me think of the first time I went to China, in which we saw these beautiful elements. And anyway, so this was in November before pandemic. And well, then the building got built during the pandemic. We have a Chinese architect that is working with us there that was working for us for 2 years in our office in Berlin, yes, so he went back to China precisely in the pandemic. So he took care of the building. As you see here, this is the entrance, an entrance that is done with a bridge, and it's done again by this repetition of elements, it's the same element. And with two different shades of green and 1 shade of red in order to combine with the colors of nature around. And well, it's difficult to go to China now, but I'm really looking forward to go someday soon and be able to, not to show you the photographs, but to show it to you and tell it to you by really what is happening there. So from Guangzhou, I'm going to go to the city of Paris, in which we entered the competition and we won it for the new city of the theater. And here is the city of Paris. And if you see this you see the growth of the city, you see all the different housing, and you see there in the center of the image, you see a park. Well, this area in which the park was created, at the back, when the park finishes, is in this very place in which the city of the theater is going to be organized and built, we hope. This is another map of the city of Paris of the 19th century, where this wall was built. It was built, the old wall of Paris, that was destroyed very quickly in the very beginning of the 20th century. And only very few pieces of the wall remain, and one of the pieces that remain is very near the Port de Clichy, which is the place in which we are going to be working. We are working here in that space. If you see, you can still trace the park, and you see that it finishes there against the red spot. And it's a very impressive site. It's very impressive because of all the pre-existences that it has. First of all, it has this red line is one of the only pieces of the wall that remains. And also, with this section. And this section is important because it has this 45-degree angle, and it has this empty space that in many places now it's been used to trace the peripheric of around Paris. And these other buildings that are called the Atelier Berthier, built also by the architect Garnier, that was the architect of the Opera of Paris, and that were the buildings that were used to produce the scenography of the opera. And these are the people that are working with the scenography. The buildings are the ones that you see. They are tough buildings, rough buildings, built of stone, very closed, but that we wanted to keep them because it's precisely in this place where the Comédie Française, l'Odéon, and the Conservatoire, the very important cultural institutions of France that got together to create the city of the theater. So for us, it was important to work with these pre-existences that we had. So what we decided to do, first of all, is to give importance and vision to that piece of the wall of the city. So we created a new building that was going to take the same shape of the wall of the city, and that was going to be standing over it. And that was going to be like the end of the park. At the end of the park that will show that beneath the building we have the wall. We needed to create more space, so we created a new slab, a new green slab at the same height as the park. The height of the park was over the street, so we could continue the park with a bridge and joined this new slab. So by that, what we did was really keeping the existence and creating the new space that we needed to solve the problem. what we are really doing was really creating a new urban scenography, a new urban scene in which the new building was going to be the scenography, and really the existing buildings were going to be the actors of the place, in a metaphor with the theater. We work with existing buildings, simply open them a bit in order to make them more accessible for the public coming in. And in the central space, we use the existing buildings to create a new public area, a new covered public plaza that is going to be the one that gives access to the three different institutions, to the back, the Conservatoire, and to the other two sides, the Comédie Française and the Odeon. If you see it in the section, you see the area, the ramp that comes down of the park, hits the street, and then we go to the public area again to go through the ramp, through the grades, to the new created slab above. I'm not going to explain the floor plan because it's quite complex, because you see that there are a lot of places for the theater, but I can tell you that the green area is the more public space, yellow is the Conservatoire, blue is the Odeon, and pink is the Comédie Française. In the section, you see that we needed to create, why we needed to create this new slab, this new green slab, because we needed to have the enough height for the creation of the new experimentary theater spaces. This is the for the Odeon. As I tell you, it's experimental area, and all of the seats can be moved around and taken away. And this is the other one, the place for the Comédie Française. This is the upper part, and we created this new slab, and we continued it to the facade of the new building, a facade that's going to be a green facade that also acts, as I said before, as the ending, as the finishing of the park of the city. The back facade was a problem because it's in front of the Minister of something, the one that creates the money or something like that, and we were not allowed to open windows to it, so we did a translucent, not a transparent facade. This is the image of the building, a building that for us was speaking about a metaphor, really, about the relation, a new scenography in relation to the scene of the theater, or also this facade that deals and relates to the same, it's done with with strings, in the same way that the strings are to move the scenography of the theater. Sorry, sometimes my English doesn't come out. And also because of the section in relation to this section that we knew that it existed in front of the old walls of the city of Paris. And from this building, I'm going to go to the old one. I hope that I'm not tiring you too much. It's in Laulasma, in Estonia, and is the foundation for Arvo Part. Here we are in Estonia, and this place is called Laulasma. And it is here, in this beautiful forest, that lives Arvo Part and his family, his wife Nora. And it is in this forest where the government of Estonia decided to create the foundation for Arvo Part. For us, a project about landscape, music, and architecture. This is Arvo Part, when he was composing with bells. And this down here is one of his very, very beautiful notations. Arvo Part is the living composer most reproduced in the world. He's a figure in Estonia, and because of that, the government of Estonia decided to create with him his foundation. In this competition, everything was special. Even the way that we got the brief in this spiral that we immediately connected with this other spiral of Arbopart for his composition Tabula. And in fact, the name of our project was called Tabula. We started working with the spiral and with the pentagon, because the pentagon is the geometrical figure that is more repeated in nature. We worked in relation to the music. We created patios relating to the silences, the silence of the music of Arbopart. And to nature. We wanted to access the hall by walking, so we situated the access of the cars very near the road, while the building was in the more far part of the forest. A place we found with less trees in which we could situate a floating roof. The special elements that create the building are, first of all, the patios, around which we conform the public space. A second important element, a varying wall that is around all the building, creates some of the most important spaces and separates the public areas from the private areas. And the floating roof, the roof that structurally is held by that wall. The roof folds, and in that folding creates the more domestic space and the more public space. The facade, which is liberated from structure, we can work with it, is a series of small columns. Columns that are related both to music and to landscape. A series of columns, some of them structural, some of them mechanical, and some of them included simply for the rhythm. By working with Arbopart, there was some day that our drawings and his notations simply got together, and we started appreciating some relations that appear there simply by transparency. Relations that sometimes simply go even to the way of drawing. Of these very personal relations, the Foundation Arbopart has produced a book. And this is the place, the day where we established where the building was going to be. Here we are with Arbopart, which is the most gentle person of the world. And this day, he seemed to be a little bit unhappy. So we asked him what's wrong. And he said, well, I think that the building is not well placed because maybe we see a house in the distance. So he really asked us to move the building, something which is really difficult and in the middle of a forest. So we went back to work with him, and there we are working with him in trying to moving the building the necessary not to see that house. And while we were working, he told us, now I understand that a composer and an architect work in the same way. We never finish working. We can always continue working and producing a better project. Here are the people of the foundation. And the day that the ground of the building was hold. And I have to say, I show these photographs because everything was important in this project. Everything was about music. And whenever something happened, it was celebrated. And there was the choir singing in the back all the time, I mean, here. And what happened is that it created really a team feeling. And everybody that was working in the construction, the engineers, the architects, everybody felt that there was this team feeling in that all of us were working for something that was going to be great. And that team feeling was important because it managed everybody to go through the very hard times of construction. And finish the building on time for the opening. As I told you, we thought that we had to go through the woods to the building. We did trace a path that after that it was full of grass again. You could trace it to follow it to the building. When we arrived there, you were received by the facade of columns. Only two materials for the facade, the wood and the glass. We use the glass as a continuous element in order to introduce the light. And the wood in the places for service areas, like the back part of the auditorium. A continuous window in the outside that related to the courtyards in the inside. A fluid space with no doors. The landscape in the outside in connection to the landscape of the courtyards, in which the same grass of the outside was introduced. The wall, the structural wall that defines some of the spaces, if we continue through it, we reach the library. A library towards we entered in between those small spaces in between the courtyards. If we go back and we walk with the wall again, we get to this important place, the small auditorium of the foundation. The auditorium that's made by a wooden box, even the acoustical panels. The colors of the furniture were selected in order to relate to the woods and to the different colors of the different seasons of the year. The acoustical panels that were part of the composition of the room were created by Higini Arau. And I think that Arbopart was happy the day of the opening in the way that his music was heard in the auditorium. And this is the window through which Arbopart did not want to see the house, did only want to see the woods. Through the roof and in the patios, we see another special element, a chapel. Because Arbo and Nora were very religious and they wanted to have a chapel inside the foundation. A chapel that we placed in one of the courtyards, white concrete in the outside and a white interior, so that they could do with the inside what they needed to do and put what they wanted to see. The courtyards, which are like when you can explain all of the building in relation to geometry. and also to materials. Important also is the way that you see the building at night. Because in Estonia, there are long months in which there is not very long hours of light during the day. And another important element, a tower. Because Arbopart wanted to see the sea. The sea was very near, but there was no way to see it unless you could grow up over the trees. And that was only possible to be done with the tower. To build the tower, we went back to the notations of Arbopart. And we proposed a pentagonal base with a series of columns that were going to be tied together or holded through an iron spiral following the Fibonacci series. An empty tower that was only going to hold a stair and an elevator in order to be able to get up over the trees and to a platform where Arbopart could see the sea and could continue composing this beautiful music that he's giving to us. This is the render that we presented to the competition. And this is the finished building. For us, a project about landscape, music, and architecture. Thank you very much. Sure, no problem.
Thank you so much. It's such a fabulous lecture. Almost speechless. I'll just open to have some questions. Maybe while people are thinking, maybe I'll start that with a word. I mean, I love that talk. Every project is extraordinary and radically different. I can think of no other firm in the world where every project you can see that it's yours, but it's unexpected and delightful. Definitely when I see it, I see Morales, I see Meneo, I see Alto, Lina Babardi, Sharon Mees, I see Gordon Mata Clark, I see Smithson, I see Marinus or Neruda. Right?
I don't know. I don't know what to say to that.
But I guess it's really a question about knowledge. Like, and we talked about this a little bit with Carly. I wonder, like, it seems like there's so much knowledge in there, and it's so different from the way most firms seem to establish a kind of identity. And I just wonder how much of like that sort of fountain of knowledge brought to a project might come out because of the way that so many of these seem to be won by competition as opposed to a commission.
Well, I don't know, maybe. I mean, because when I'm speaking, if you remember what I said in the beginning, when I said that we like to establish connections and that these connections tend to be, or these relations tend to be personal. I think that when I refer to personal is because when you look to things, all of the things that you see really are transformed through the knowledge that you already previously have and through the knowledge that you are acquiring during the whole years that you are practicing. And I think that this is our background. That knowledge that you have been referring to, of course, all these people have been our teachers, our professors, we are working with them, so that knowledge is there. When we work in a competition, in a way, it's not that you don't have a client. I think that that's a wrong way of thinking, because in the competition you do have a client and you do have a brief. But what it's true is that when you only have the brief and you start working, you work more freely, because you don't, I mean, then you are alone until you present the competition and you win it, and then you do have a client. And then you have to respect your clients, which is, but before that, you are alone. And when, sorry, maybe when you are alone there, you are a little bit more free. And because you are more free, maybe you let yourself go, and then you say, okay, fine. Now, here we have a concept, and then you continue with that concept. And probably it's true. I mean, I have to say that we have very, very few projects that we have not been working in a competition. I don't know why. It has been like that. It's maybe good luck or maybe bad luck, I don't know, because but it is true that you work in a more open way. You don't have to answer to anybody. I insist, only until you win it, because then you do have a client.
With the facade elements that look like the ceramics of the roofs, or it just makes, like, it makes sense, but I guess I'm curious about how you decide what those elements or what those specific aspects should be, and like, how do you narrow it down, or when you go to the site, you just know that this is what I want to put?
No. I mean, no, it never happens like that. Yeah, I wish it would, no. But, I mean, maybe you have to take into consideration that, for example, lots of these buildings have taken 10 years. I mean, it's not something that is really, that you go there and you say, boom, we win the competition, this building is going to be built. No, that doesn't happen. I don't know, for example, Medina Zahara, we won the competition in 2002, and the building was finished in 2009. But there are other, I don't know, a building takes a minimum of 7 to 10 years to be built, if you are lucky. If you're lucky. So this is a process. The thing is that when you look back, I mean, once you have the building there, and once the building is there and you look back, you say, oh yes, it was this moment when I took this specific decision. But it's really a process. I mean, and the process starts by learning about the place in which you are going to work. First of all, you have to learn. And then, I mean, you have to learn, you have to look to it. We could never have decided to use this element if we did not know about the traditional Cantonese architecture. So once that we know about the traditional Cantonese architecture, and when we take into consideration all the other aspects of the project, like in this case, we want to make something that is easy to build, and that for us it's easy to, in a way, to take through without making many changes, then maybe that's the moment in which we decide, okay, let's work with this, and let's work with this shape, because this shape is going to connect us to these other places. So there are moments in which you say, this is what I have to decide to, but you never know when that's going to happen, or when it happens, or how it happens. The only thing I can tell you is that you have to work for it, and to learn about it. And you have to know what it exists, what is there before, and you have to understand it, because if not, you are not going to be able to manage to know what you have to do. Well, that's our way of looking to it. Yes? Again, it's very difficult. It's a question. It's very difficult. It's something that I don't know. I don't know how to answer, because again, in a way, the answer maybe is the same as the question before. we need to study the structure. And in a sense, it's very important to understand it, because there are some structures that you can touch, but there are some other structures that we have to feel a complete respect for them and say, no, this is untouchable. So that is what those things you have to set by being there, and by understanding again. And I'm not saying that we cannot be wrong, because sometimes you take a decision and the decision is wrong because of whatever problems, or because you simply took a wrong decision. That's also possible, that's also there. But if you know, even if the decision is wrong, but if you take the decision with the knowledge or with the thinking that you know what you are doing, and you take it through the whole project, I think that at the end, that wrong decision will transform and will come a right decision. The important thing is sometimes to stop and to look back and to see if you are really complying with the original idea that started in the building, or more than the original idea, the original line that you can take through to the building. And it's not, how to do that? I don't know. Yes? A lot of times, really a lot of times, because it's a continuous forward, backwards, forward, backwards, and I mean, and I think that that's architecture. I mean, it's not only in the relation that we establish with other buildings; it's in all projects. I mean, you don't have to be frightened of going back. And sometimes even, I mean, and I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, you go in one direction and suddenly you say, I'm not sure of this, you go back, you start something else, and then maybe you come back to the original thing, because you think, no, those decisions that I had taken there maybe were the right ones, and then I continue in that direction. So don't be frightened of going back. I think it's good, because like that you test yourself, and you test really what you are doing. Yes.
Hey, that was a great lecture. Thank you so much for coming. It's obvious that geometry, like pure geometry, plays a very important role in your architecture.
Yes.
You're not constrained by it. So I'm wondering, what is the significance of pure geometry? What does it mean to you? Why do you use it? Especially the pentagons.
Well, yeah, the pentagons appear a lot of times. Pentagons, hexagons, octagons. Yes, we work with regular geometry. For us, the geometry really helps a lot to structure a project, and it really helps us to go through, because it organizes a structure even when you break it, because it really helps to lay down like a basis, a solid basis, and then you can move it. And like that, like, I mean, I don't know if you are understanding me when I'm answering, but it's like, if you lay the structure, if you say, this is what is going to be and this is what is going to work, the geometrical structure, I mean, if you decide on a structure and you lay the geometrical structure, then you can skip it, and you can break it, and you can play with it. But first of all, you lay it, and then you understand it, and it organizes your project. And then you have the layout, and then you move it.
The faith in geometry, but I would also say, I don't know how you work, but when I see those drawings, I see a lot of work, like many iterations, rather than an early decision. Fuesanta, thank you so much for just a beautiful lecture.
Thank you very much.